There is a very widespread idea that free trade is always the natural path to economic progress. But history shows something very different. The world's greatest powers were not born liberal. They became liberal after they became strong. And it is precisely this historical logic that helps explain why Donald Trump bets on protectionism as a strategy to preserve American power. Before we continue, leave a like on the video. That helps the channel keep producing deep analysis without slogans and without cheering for any side. During the 19th century, the United States was far from being the symbol of free markets we know today. On the contrary, the country grew behind high import tariffs, strong incentives for domestic industry, and an explicit policy of replacing foreign products with national production. Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers, openly argued that a young nation needed to protect its infant industries until they were strong enough to compete. This strategy was not uniquely American. Germany, Japan, and even the United Kingdom followed similar paths during their periods of ascent. Historically, free trade has almost always been defended by those who were already at the top. When the United States consolidated itself as the world's largest industrial power, especially after World War II, the narrative changed. The country began to defend open markets, globalization, and international supply chains, but not out of altruism. Because at that moment, opening the world meant exporting American products, exporting American capital, and exporting American influence. The problem begins when the game changes. If you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now. Here, we discuss economics through history, not through slogans. Moving into the 21st century, the United States began to realize that globalization was no longer working exclusively in its favor. Entire industries were relocated to countries with cheaper labor. Strategic supply chains became dependent on foreign nations. The trade deficit became structural. Meanwhile, China used free trade strategically, combining external openness with strong internal state intervention. The result was an asymmetry. The United States opened its market, China opened its, but under its own rules. Trump emerges precisely in this context of economic frustration, deindustrialization, and relative loss of power. His protectionist discourse does not come out of nowhere. It arises from the perception that the previous model began to erode the American industrial base. Tariffs on steel, aluminum, technology, and Chinese products are not merely economic measures. They are political signals. Trump tries to communicate something simple to the average voter. The United States cannot depend on the rest of the world to produce strategic goods. And this message gained even more strength after recent shocks to global supply chains, such as health crises, geopolitical conflicts, and technological disputes. If you're following so far, write in the comments, economics is power. From an economic standpoint, protectionism has clear costs. It can raise prices, reduce efficiency, and provoke trade retaliation. That is a fact. But Trump's debate is not purely economic in the classical sense. It is geopolitical. Trump sees the economy as an extension of national security. In his view, a country that does not produce semiconductors, energy, steel, and critical technology is a vulnerable country. Protectionism, in this sense, is not an attempt to maximize global efficiency, but to minimize strategic risk. The logic is simple. It may be more expensive to produce at home, but it is safer. Moreover, tariffs function as bargaining tools. They are not used only to protect, but to force negotiations. Trump uses protectionism as leverage of power, not as ideological dogma. That is why his discourse deeply unsettles traditional economists. He accepts short-term inefficiency in exchange for preserving long-term hegemony. The central question is not whether protectionism is good or bad. The real question is it functional within the current American strategy? At its core, Trump is reacting to a structural shift in the world. The United States is no longer the only uncontested industrial power. The global system has become more fragmented, and competition has ceased to be purely economic. It has become civilizational. Trump's protectionism is not a historical anomaly. It is a return to an old logic. When power feels threatened, it closes ranks. History shows that countries defend free trade when they feel comfortable and defend protection when they feel pressured. Trump bets on protectionism because he believes the greatest risk for the United States is not paying more for some products, but losing control over its own productive base. Whether this strategy will work or not remains an open question. But one thing is certain, this debate is not moral, it is strategic. If you want to keep understanding economics without naivety, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Here, economic theory meets reality. See you in the next video.